Good afternoon, everyone. This is Josh Frank. We're going to go ahead and get started in about 60 seconds. Let all the other stragglers in, and we'll get started. If you're just coming in, we've got about 30 seconds, and we'll be getting started. Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning for some. Good afternoon for others. This is Josh Frank with Federal Access. We're going to be talking today about hiring business developers. And before I get into the slides, just an initial comment. This is one of the more challenging issues that face companies, and it's both small and large business. The ability to afford to hire someone, knowing whether or not you're going to get someone good. Many companies think it's a crapshoot, and so we're gonna. This is probably one of my more favorite webinars that I've given, not just for Federal Access, but in the last several years, because of how simple and direct many of the recommendations are. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. We have quite a few new Federal Access members in the program that are on this webinar today. And some of you don't know who I am. I'm the managing partner for RSM. I've been in the market over 25 years. I'm an intel officer, intel officer with the Army. And I'm a big small business advocate, right? And I specialize in techniques and strategies for accelerating into the market. And today's going to be basic to advanced. Should be about 50 minutes with some time for Q&A at the end. Everything that is in this webinar today, in one way, shape, or form, comes from Federal Access. And that's one of the value propositions of being a member is you get some really good information. I think today's webinar is actually going to be one of the strongest for 2018. It's the first, and I think it's going to be one of the strongest. We're going to talk about changing how you look at commissions and more importantly, compensation plans. We're going to talk about different types of developers, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to talk about how do you interview them? What are some good questions that you can ask? We're going to talk about compensation plan. We're going to talk, I'll go through a couple of examples or case studies. We're going to talk escalators briefly and how important those are to your compensation plans. When do you pay commissions, right? And what are your obligations should somebody leave or you fire them? And so I'll give you industry best practices on those as well. So generally, this is one of the top 5 challenges that any company faces, right? How do you hire strong salespeople? Should we outsource it? Should we hire? I will tell you, and if you've been a member of FA for a while, or even if you're a member, you're one of our clients, outsourcing versus hire, we say there's 2 positions you really never want to outsource. One is business development and one is proposal writing, proposal management. That being said, there are always exceptions, and, hiring someone may not be in your best interest at that time. But in general, I recommend against outsourcing business development because it's rarely successful. And then resumes can be misleading. We've all looked at resumes, right? Anybody that's a business owner has looked at resumes, and resumes can be made to say whatever the owner of that resume wants you to read. So some general challenges. When you look at commissions, these are the common statements by business owners, and I've spoken to thousands of business owners, and probably hundreds of those I've discussed, salespeople and their commissions, etc. And I hear, I'll worry about that in a few years when I make more money, when I hit a certain revenue threshold. Hey, I'll pay them more when they've proven they're worth it. And by the way, and excuse my French, that's ass backwards. Because if you're going to pay them more when they have proven they're worth it, then you're hiring the wrong salespeople. Okay, and we'll walk through that here in a minute. I'll consider after the closing a deal, I'm not paying anybody, that kind of money, let alone something that's, anything above six figures. No matter, and if you've said any of these, great, it is what it is, but you're in the business to make money, right? So you've got to understand the concepts of how companies grow, and you've got to remove the barriers. And one of those barriers may or may not be for each of you that are on the webinar today. One of those barriers may be you just can't fathom paying somebody that kind of money. And the reality is you got to get over that. So, and that moves us on into your expectations, right? Because, hey, I don't know if I'm comfortable with someone making that kind of money, well, that's an expectation. No matter how bad you want a contract, right? The sales cycle is what it is. You've got to prospect, you've got to collect intelligence, you got to position and differentiate, communicate competitive advantage, ghost the weaknesses of your competition. You've got to have a strong foothold on that, on any given opportunity. And you can accelerate that, right? Federal Access is a part of that. It's helping you accelerate. But at the end of the day, activities has one eye. I just caught that. But at the end of the day, salespeople must still perform pretty much the same activities. You can accelerate those activities to a point, but they still have to execute them, they have to perform them, and they have to do them in a very specific order. And so one of the most common questions that the companies will ask their prospective salespeople is, well, how long is it going to take for you to win a contract? I know this to be a fact because every single company I've been at, I've been asked. Well, first, let's set expectations. The average salesperson for a large contract, I'm not talking commodities or products, which you literally could win in 7 days, but on the service side, it's going to take 18 to 24 months. That's average. The average business developer, the average sales professional, you're looking at 1.5 to 2 years. Now, some of you are going, oh my God, there is no way. That's just unacceptable. We'll get to that. Only 10% of all your average salespeople are going to actually win a contract. And everyone else, you end up firing them before they ever win. Now, if you've been firing your salespeople at the 12-month mark every single time because that's when you believe they should have had a contract, maybe there's always other circumstances that go into a termination, but I would say you need to look at some other things, which we'll go through. But bottom line, only 10% of all the average salespeople, right? And by the way, the majority of the market is average, right? So 90% of them, you're going to fire them anyway. Stars, not the average, but sales stars will win a contract in 14 to 18 months. And superstars will do it in 6 to 12 months. Now, what's the difference between average and stars and superstars? I'm going to go into that. Next slide. So again, but the exceptions on this is commodities and products, which you can do much faster. So before I go into superstar, let's make sure we're talking our lexicon, our terminology. A lot of you have heard the phrase, capture management. And you just assume, that's just sales, right? Business development, it's the same as capture. Business development is your prospecting, your sales, you're winning the contract. And then post-award, there's execution. That whole process is capture management. Okay, it's the cradle to grave. It's from you identify an opportunity to you actually put boots on the ground, feet on the ground, and you actually do the work. Business development, which is what we're focused on today, is that left side of the equation, is where you identify opportunities and you move them through the pipeline. And what I mean is you're collecting intelligence, you're becoming more and more qualified, the opportunity is becoming more and more qualified, and you're becoming more and more competitive. Okay? So today we're focused on the business development side. So, excuse me, average star, superstars, average, this is 90% of the market, okay? There's lots of activity. Oh, gee, boss, see, I went to this event and I added 10 opportunities to my pipeline, and I made a bunch of calls. I didn't get through to a lot of people, but, I've left messages with all the contracting officers, and, there's a little direction, though, right? When you look at the work that they're doing, you're like, okay, but where are we going with any of this? Yeah, right. And if you ever look at one of your salespeople and you're like, okay, I see you've got these pieces in place, but what's the next step? What are you doing next? That's a little strategic direction. They're focused on selling your solution instead of the value. So they understand that you sell garden hoses or technology or construction services or whatever it may be, but they don't know how to communicate the value of those services to your clients. They're very reactive, right? Almost everything in their pipeline is from FBO. These folks are going to increase revenue by a very small percentage, right? And they rarely ever make sales quota. Now, let me remind you again, that's 90%. 9 out of every 10 sales professionals that you could interview are going to fall into this group. Very little strategic direction, very reactive. They don't make their quota. And if they do win contracts for you, odds are they're so small that you're just not making a lot of money. Stars and superstars, they make up the other 10%. Stars, they're either really good at business development or sales, but not both. In other words, they're really good at identifying opportunities, maybe collecting information and intelligence, but they just can't close it. And that may be when it gets to proposal phase, they just don't have the strategic cognitive ability to write a competitive proposal or communicate to the proposal team, if you have one, that these are the win themes, or, this is what's going to set you apart and differentiate you. So, stars are either good at one side or the other. They are proactive. They're going to find opportunities that are not yet in FedBizOps. And in a crowded room, they will talk to people they don't know. All right, they understand sales. They will also make their quota. Stars will make their quota. They will win the contracts for you, and they'll increase your revenue by anywhere from 10 to 50%. Superstars. 1 out of every 100 sales professionals are a superstar. They are experts at both sides. They can identify opportunities in pre-acquisition, and they can close them, and they can get, the proposals will win. Again, proactive. They don't just talk to everyone in a room. They get everybody's contact info, and these are the folks that double revenue. So, I know you're all going, okay, well, that's great, but, how do I get one of these superstars? And many of you are thinking, I just don't have the ability. I don't have the money. I don't have my company's not big enough. No superstar is going to want to come to my company because we're small, or we're mid-tier, or whatever it may be, right? And the answer is, you've got to ask the right questions. And I'm going to help you do that today. So let's talk the interview side of the house. First of all, selecting the right candidate. Okay, so we want a superstar. Well, we want a star or a superstar. And it's real hard. By the way, it's very difficult to identify between a star and a superstar when you're hiring, it is very easy to tell between average and the stars, okay? The resume is a good start, right? And we already talked about this, but anybody can modify it to what they want you to read. So you focus on their references, you focus on the answers to your questions, and we're going to go through those questions today. Some people have also asked me, Josh, what about experience? How important is the number of years? Well, they got to have several years experience, right? You're not going to pay superstar type compensation package to someone that's been a salesperson for just 1 year. But it doesn't have to be 20. Doesn't have to be 15. For some, 4, 5, 6 years may be enough, depending on what is their win percentage? You know, it's not enough to ask someone, well, okay, at your last company, you won these 4 contracts. And oh, by the way, did you prime? Were you in charge of those opportunities? Were you the prime for them? You know, don't let folks that only have subcontractor experience, you know, try to pass off wins as if they were the ones that did the capture management for them and identified the opportunities and wrote the proposal. No, as a sub, you know the prime writes the proposal, sub doesn't. But assuming it's all prime work, what was their win percentage? Other common questions I get asked are, how important is industry experience? Now, there are some industries where the experience is valuable, but I would say being a strong salesperson is way more important than the industry. You know, and give you an example. Let's say you're an AV company, audiovisual company. You know, oh, well, you know, my salespeople have to have experience. They have to know, you know, that this server and this monitor and this type of wire, or let's assume you're a security company, right? And you're putting in one of our clients, Percivis, will love this. You're putting in a Wi-Fi guest internet system, right, for some federal agency, and you know, I want them to know, you know, what the access points and what type they are. I want them to have experience with running the cables and running a team. And I would say to you, no, you don't need that level of industry experience. You need a generalist. So for that first bullet, how important is industry experience? I'd say you're looking for a generalist. You're looking for a sales professional that has general expertise, general, you know, background in your industry. Because it is unlikely you're going to find a whole bunch of stars and superstars that are within your industry. That's one. And two, you want to sell. You need a salesperson. Years experience we covered. How important is background and set-asides? I've some companies have said, well, we're woman-owned. I want to make sure our salesperson has experience selling woman-owned type. That's horrible. Okay, well, I want our salespeople to have experience with SDV-USB set-asides. That's horrible. Okay, don't focus on your statuses. Statuses are not going to help you win contracts. They're just an acquisition strategy. Average number of interviews, you know, for regardless of company size, you know, it could be anywhere, 10 to 15, you know, is what you're going to go through. It is time consuming. Hire a retired general or senior executive. Wow, this one rarely works. And I have already in 2018, I've spoken to 2 or 3 companies that have said, hey, we're hiring this retired general. We're hiring this retired senior executive from the SES. They, first of all, can they open doors? Sure. But are you sure they were liked when they were in the service or when they were in the government? There are a lot of, it's a microcosm society. There are a ton of general officers that are completely disliked by their peers, by other generals. So imagine this general, this retired 3-star that you're paying $25,000 a month, Yes, that's what companies often pay, $25,000 a month. And that general, you're expecting that general who's now retired to go back to his alma mater, his organization, his command, talk to the current commanding general and get you in. Well, what if that current commanding general used to work for this one and hates his guts? Folks, this happens all the time. So, I am, unless you're a large system integrator, unless you are a large corporation, the ROI on hiring one of these retired, bigwigs is really small for the average company. Excuse me. Let's talk the interview. So that question, that core question, how long is it going to take for you, Josh, to win that contract? Well, the average sales professional hates that question. Hates it with a passion. Why? Because they don't know how to answer it. And depending on how they answer, it's going to tell you how strong they are. It's going to tell you if they're average or they're a star, superstar. It's going to give you an idea if they've had any success in the past. And the answer is what I call the 3, 6, 12-month ramp up. And so, when you are interviewed, and I'll give you an example. I did this with a company called the Newberry Group in the Midwest, and this is before I was doing what I'm doing today, and I was running MasterCard or the Department of Defense for MasterCard, and they flew up, and they interviewed me, and they said, "Hey, how long is it going to take?" And I said, well, it's going to take me 3 months to understand the company and how you differentiate, the value you provide, right? How to position in those, so in the first 6 months, including those first 3, that's when I start filling the pipeline with opportunities, et cetera. And then sometime, in those next 12 months or those first 12 months, I'm taking meetings, going to industry days, I'm teaming with companies, going to conferences, et cetera. But bottom line, I'm up and running in 6 months. And, the owner, she was thinking it, her face showed it, and she didn't say this out loud, but it was obvious. Why would I ever consider hiring you if you may not even pay for yourself for a year, right? But this speaks to setting realistic expectations. If you have an expectation that you're going to, for the average sales professional, bring them into your company and win a major contract in less than a year, you're mistaken. And yes, that means you have to have the cash flow and have someone on the bench that's not paying for themselves for an entire year. Now, that can be sped up, and that is sped up by your stars and your superstars. So, when you ask that question, how long is it going to take? Nobody wants to say a year, right? The folks you're interviewing aren't dumb. They're likely going to say 6 months to get the job. And even if they think it's a year, but they want the job, of course they're going to tell you what they know you want to hear, right? Now, if anybody starts sweating and they're like, and they just bumble around and they're not sure how to respond to that question, the odds are you should be looking for somebody else. One question and how they answer is whether or not you should be looking at the next candidate. I believe that. I know it to be true. Okay? And when they say, no matter what they say, whether they say, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, if you are a student of Federal Access, if you watch any of our webinars, you will know that our techniques and strategies are proven to accelerate so that you can win a sale within 6 to 12 months, right? But we're talking new candidates that have no clue what even FA is. And so the most important interview question, the absolute most important one, is can you outline how you identify opportunities, how you engage them, how do you position with both government and our teaming partners, and how do you ensure the proposal is competitive so that we win the contract? This is the absolute most important interview question. Okay, it's more important than their references. It's more important than how successful they've been in the past, because it's hard to really prove, depending on who the references are. You have to look through the optics and the perception of the resume and everything else. Anyone can influence the references. Anyone can fudge past performance. And you all know this to be true. Come on, look at all the resumes you guys have all seen at some point. You want to focus on strategies for engaging. In other words, remember what I said, business development is identifying opportunities and moving those opportunities through the pipeline, right? This question number 2, you're forcing them to explain to you how they move opportunities through the pipeline, right? How do you identify them? Okay, once you identify them, what do you do? And how do you then position with the government? And if whether we're priming or subbing, how do you position with those partners? And then based on the information and intelligence they should be telling you they're collecting, how does that move into the proposal phase so that it is competitive? And when it goes to source selection, your company wins the contract. That is the absolute most important interview question. Okay? Now, the 3-6-12, I want to make sure I have drilled this home with you. For me personally, as a sales professional, and you can rank me as a star or superstar, I think everybody can figure out where I'm at. I can go to any company and figure out what you sell in a matter of minutes, right? I can probably do it just by your website alone. But for me to be successful in selling your products or your services, I have to understand the value that they provide, because that's how you position and that's how you win contracts. I have to understand your past performance. Remember I said, in the first 3 months, I got to figure out your solutions and your past performance. Well, I'm going to study each of your contracts. My first day on the job, I'm going to go, I need to see copies of the statements of work for every contract we've won in the last 3 years. And a lot of business owners go, why? I'm sorry, Josh, well, why do you need that? What a silly, silly question. But that's because a lot of business owners don't understand how this process works for a sales professional. So I'm going to study the scope. I'm going to go look at reports, monthly reports. I'm going to look at after action reviews. I'm going to look at the level of effort, and I'm going to ask myself, okay, based on this contract, based on what your company has already won, how do I differentiate? Okay, I'm the sales guy, right? Yes, the company has said, well, here's our differentiators. That's not enough. I need to know how to differentiate on any specific given opportunity so that I can map it to the past performance of my new company. Okay? And that's the next one. Every opportunity, I map it against it. And what I tell people, when I was interviewing, when I was a sales professional, look, I'm going to probably close the first major contract in about a year, right? But look, I will focus tactically and try to close stuff before then. But in general, based on the ramp up of 3, 6, 12, right, that I've done in every job that I've pretty much ever worked at, it's going to take about a year. Okay? So this is what the really strong ones do. And this is how we, as strong sales professionals, convince other companies to team with us. Okay? It's about maturity. I did this, again, I worked for a company called Newberry before, this was 10, 11 years ago. It was long before I started the company. And, I told the business owner, right? I said, look, 3 months to understand who you are, what you do, brand of the company, all the product services. Another 3 months up to 6 months, right? To understand past performance, start filling pipeline, and then about month 6, I am hitting the ground running. I would expect to win my first major contract by about month 12, somewhere in there. where the average sales professional is 2 years, by the way, right? And I closed the first major contract. It was the first major new contract, largest contract in over 5 years, and it was a subcontract worth $10 million. Okay, so and that actually took me 13 months. It wasn't 12, it was 13. Let's talk some other strong questions, right? You got candidates sitting in front of you. Question 3 is a takeoff of question 2. You can ask question 2, and you may not get a really consistent or detailed answer. So another way to ask is, hey, walk me through how you perform business development. And then just be quiet, and you want to hear stuff about prospecting. And if they don't talk about some of these things, then have a little bullet list in front of you and go, well, talk to me about full versus open or versus full and open versus set-asides, right? Have you ever worked with any IDIQs, any MATOCs? What have you learned from those, right? If they walk you through business development and they never mention collecting intelligence to make you more competitive, then ask a question. About, at what parts of this process are you collecting information and intelligence? A bad answer would be, well, throughout the whole process. Well, that's true, but you need detail. Building a pipeline. What systems have you used in the past? What are you comfortable with? What's the most important thing in your pipeline as you're managing it? Talk some relationship management. Decision makers, meeting with them, working with proposal team, or if you're real small, are you expecting them to write it themselves? But have them walk you through how they perform BD. And in terms of the systems, the reason why these systems, you want to ask some of these questions is because there are a lot of the 90%. The average sales professionals, all they do is use those systems as a crutch. Right? All the bid matching, I won't give specific names, all the bid matching, contract management tools, data analysis systems out there, those are not a crutch to sales. But the average salesperson, right? 9 out of 10 salespeople in this country, they go into them, they pull data, and when you ask a question, they go, well, the contracting officer said blah, blah, blah. They didn't say that they got it out of the system, or that they made a call or spoke to them. They pulled the data out of the system. My point to you is, you've got to make sure that the salespeople that you're hiring are not fixated on all these online systems, because those are just tools, and they do not replace strong sales practices, right? You can talk to them about CRM, talk to them about the pipeline, but it's all about the details. Okay, so for this slide, just to recap, you want them to walk you through business development, how they move opportunities. I'm stomping my foot. How they move opportunities through the pipeline, and then ensuring that they don't overutilize these systems. The systems are important. Don't get me wrong. They're very important. But you don't want salespeople that all they do is go in these systems and they spend 8 hours a day in them updating stuff so that they can give you reports and they sound good. And the whole time their fingers are crossed that they win a contract. And hope is not a strategy. Couple others. Talk to me about the agencies or commands you've successfully supported, right? Won contracts with. What's the greatest challenge that you found in selling to, Department of the Interior? And you'd get that from looking at the resume or what have you. Talk to me about your last company and what you accomplished, right? And the most common answer is, well, I did really well, and I got us work with the Army, I got us work with HHS, Health and Human Services. And it increased our company's revenue by 20%. You need more detail than that. Don't take their word for this stuff. Okay. One, you don't know if they were the lead. They will say that they were the lead. Okay. They'll say that it was their opportunity. They may have been working with somebody else and the other person did all the work. Okay. You can't take anything at face value, but you can ask good questions. On average, How many opportunities did you personally manage? How many opportunities did you end up putting on the pipeline every quarter? What was your bid percentage? How many of these opportunities did you actually submit a proposal on? And it's okay if they say 20, 30%. That's fine. That's fine, because then you're going to talk about, what revenue was generated and what was your win percentage. Again, folks that start sweating when you ask these questions, you need to be looking for the next candidate, okay? But those that think through this and respond with good answers, you've got somebody that understands sales, okay? And again, that last bullet sort of goes with the one previous. Hey, for all these BD efforts that you're telling me about that you did at your last company, were you guys prime or sub on those, right? If the answer is, well, we were prime, or we were both prime and sub, then that candidate understands business development. But if the answer is, well, we were just sub, but they were big contracts, well, they may understand how to team, but not how to hunt on their own. Very important, folks. Make sure your candidates have prime experience. No matter how strong they are at sub, it's not enough. They have to have, as a sales professional, primed, engaged in business development on prime opportunities by themselves. Okay, so you interview folks and you have a really good candidate, okay? And that candidate they are coming from a company where they made six figures. You know it. The only person in your company that makes six figures is the owner. Everybody else is in the 80, 90, at least from a management level. So there's a psychology we need to get over with, okay? We need to remove. First, an average base salary is going to attract an average business developer. So, if you are East Coast, right? If you're in the Beltway, average is probably, 85, 90,000, right? Yeah, I know there's a lot of folks who go, oh, it's 100,000. Pick somebody that lives outside the actual city itself. Midwest, it may be 60 or 65,000. Is a base salary, average base salary, right? Whatever the standard salary is for your neck of the woods, that's going to attract an average business developer. In other words, you're going to get nine out of the 10 sales professionals are going to be average. Your employees are not owners, okay? Top sales professionals are not looking to drink your Kool-Aid, okay? I've been in many startups, many small businesses. I've been in a Fortune 100. I've worked for all up and down the chain. It doesn't matter what company it is. But I don't care how excited you are as an owner. It doesn't matter to me. I don't own the company, okay? I have no stake in the company. I am your sales guy. I am going to try to make you money, and I want to make money, okay? I'm looking to make a lot of money, okay? I'm never going to be as excited as you. You can bring me into every meeting. You can explain to me why, hey, Josh, we win a couple big contracts. I'll bring you on as I'll give you an equity stake in the company. Blah, blah, blah. That's all I hear. Okay. I've been in enough companies where that just never happens. Okay. You close a big contract. I never get a share. That's rampant in the industry and in every industry. Okay. Bottom line, and I'm stomping my foot on this. Your employees, your sales professionals are never going to be as excited about how great your company is as you. Okay. So all these promises above the base salary, the stars and superstars are going to think BS. And I don't care, okay? If you want to make me a partner, fine, make me a partner. But until that happens, you're going to pay me for what I'm worth, okay? That's the ego of the really strong sales folks. So this $100,000 psychological barrier, there's no way we can afford that compensation level. Well, you're confusing compensation with base salary. And I'll talk more on that. We have examples. Josh, maybe in a year or two, after we win some contracts, I'll be able to pay you more. Well, then I'm going to go to another company. Okay? You're confusing salary with compensation. Also, your salespeople should make more money than almost everybody in management. That's the way it works. If you don't agree with me, you probably, I know this may anger some people. If you don't agree with me on that, then you don't understand how sales properly works and how salespeople properly achieve for their companies what they do. Okay? The top business developers make more annual compensation than the CEO. Notice I didn't say, that's like just base the salary and compensation, right? The whole compensation package is more than the CEO's salary. But remember, the owner, CEO, has equity stake in the company, and there's company profits and everything else. But the top salespeople in any company, I don't care if it's startup or small or mid-tier or large, they can make more money than the number one person in the company. Okay? So you've got to recognize, if you accept this, you can hire the number one star for sales in your industry. Okay? It is a profitable win-win. It's costly, yes. Okay? I already went through the first bullet, but bottom line, you're not going to hire a superstar without a full package, okay? Sales professionals like myself, right, that are as good at our craft as we are very difficult to manage, right? We have, now I've put myself into a box. I'm saying I got a big ego. In general, the really strong sales professionals have monster egos because they're very affluent. They have a lot of money because they're paid a lot of money in order to overachieve. Okay? So it is all about the numbers, right? And, what you can afford to pay, it's not just, you really have to think through this, okay? It's not just what the base salaries are. You have to look at your wrap rate. You got to look at, what's your fully burdened rate. You have to take your direct and your indirect costs into account. You have to take competitive pricing compared to your competition. You got to look at obviously, what are your margins after everything is said and done? So, all direct and indirect costs impact what type of compensation strategy you put in place. Excessive cost, if you have a building and half of it is not being used because you're saving it for growth, but you've got a lot of money tied up into it, that's excessive cost. Okay? You should have the space you need right now, and then when you're ready to grow, when it's time to grow, you can do it. Excessive costs mean you're going to have higher pricing in your bids. And if you have higher pricing in your bids, then that means you're going to have probably lower margins. Because in order for you to be competitive with the competition, you're going to have to take lower margins in order to match their pricing, right? Which means you're going to have less flexibility in how you do compensation packages. And that means you're going to be hiring only the average business developers. And that means you're not going to have really good sales. And that means you're going to have little revenue. This is really, really important to understand. This train of consciousness of if your overhead and G&A and your costs of running the company are just too high, it impacts who you can hire. And you're only going to have an average business developer. Okay? So we're going to run through a couple of examples, but There are different types of compensation, right? You've got profit sharing. You've got, that's at the end of the year. You've got spot awards. Hey, here's $1,000. Good job. You got non-financial, etc. When it comes to commissions, you've got folks, hey, I'm going to hire them straight commission. That's a question I get asked all the time, and definitely much more in the early years when we were first starting the business. And, hey, Josh, will you sell for us and be commission only? And I tell them, I go, absolutely not. There's no sharing of risk here. You want me to help your company make money? Right? So I want you to imagine that you're talking to a star or a superstar. You're not talking to an average person, because if you are, all you're going to do, you're not going to pay them anything, but they're not going to make you any money. Let me say that again. 9 out of 10 sales professionals, you try to approach them with straight commission, some are going to say yes. But they're going to be focusing on other activities with other companies that's making them money. And so you'll have somebody that's on straight commission, and 12 months later, you're like, I just don't think this straight commission thing works. Well, yeah, it doesn't. And if you say, well, I'll get a star, superstar, and promise them, hundreds of thousands of dollars. No. As a star or superstar, my response to you would be, it really doesn't matter how much money you want to pay me on the back end, unless you want to share the risk with me. You're asking me to shoulder 100% of the risk, do all this hard work. Well, guess what? I'm not the one writing the proposal. What if the proposal team is horrible? It doesn't matter how strong the sales activities are. We just can't write a good proposal. You want me to accept that risk? So straight commission, you're going to get average salespeople, some that will agree to do that, but they'll never make you money. And the stars and superstars are going to outright say absolutely no way. You got base plus commission, right? And I'll come back to that. And then you got draw against commission. And draw against commission, man, let me tell you, I don't know who comes up with some of these concepts. A draw against commission, yeah, I know there's some advantages to it. But if you make the mistake and get an average, right? 9 out of 10 folks in the market are average. If you get an average sales professional and you give them a draw, even if you have in the agreement that if they never close a contract, they have to pay you back, you're not getting it back. It's just it is horrible. Again, I know there's some industries and where that is an acceptable type program, but it's bad. I really recommend against it. What we're going to talk about today, or finish up today, is base plus commission. That's the type of compensation package I'm recommending for every company that's on this webinar today. Now, before we get into the examples, you need to make sure you understand new contract versus residual contract versus renewal contract, okay? And the reason why is because the percentages go up and down based on which one of these they are. And you have to remember, commissions are designed to increase new business. That's it. Commissions are designed to increase new business and to retain your salespeople. But if you've got, we give, 5% commission for every year of the contract. Why would you do that? Base year 5 years, and let's say the first option year, you give them 5. Well, you just incentivized me not to look for new contracts. Why should I do that when I'm getting 5%? So we have to walk through this, and we're going to go through several of examples, and then I'll bring it all together. So in this case study or example, you win a contract for $500,000, right? The profit you built 15% in, so when the contract's over, you as a company will make $75,000 in profit. Commission, you have a sales rep and you've promised them 5%. Okay, so in this example, the company makes $50,000, right? 2/3. Second example, you have a new contract, same amount, but the profit's only 10%. Okay, let's say in your industry or for what you do, let's say that your costs are just too darn high. You you're just not going to have the profit, right? I mean, you can't get 15% profit because you know your indirect or your fixed or your variable costs are just too high. But for a star, a superstar, you still have to give that high commission percentage. Because if you say, well, there's no way, I'm not giving 50%. I'm not giving 50% of the profit to the salesperson. Well, guess what? Then you're going to end up hiring an average person, an average sales rep. And that average sales rep is probably not going to close that contract for $500,000. So instead of splitting at 10%, instead of splitting the profit with your sales rep, you make $0, period. You got to get that mental aspect into your head, okay? What if you made a mistake in your pricing? You think you have 15%, right? But you really only have 10. Well, that's not on your sales rep. That's on the company. So let's make this a little bit larger, right? You win 4 contracts, right? They're worth $4.5 million. And let's say your profit is 15%, okay? That's $675,000, right? Commission, 5%. And that means you're paying your sales rep. All right, we're going to assume this is one sales rep. $225,000. Now they've got a base salary of $65,000. Yeah, that's probably someone in the Midwest. But that's a total compensation of $290,000. But your company makes $385,000. Now, for some of you going, that's nuts, that's crazy. Then fine, go hire an average sales professional. Go hire somebody who's average, and instead of $4.5 million, you'll win $250,000 on one, maybe $250,000 on another, and the company profit's going to be, I don't know, $50,000, $70,000, whatever it is. Okay. The next example, right? Same profit, but let's say you drop the commission to 3%, $135,000, right? Add that to the base. Now it's only $200,000. Well, the company has increased from $385,000 to $475,000. Okay, you have to pick it. And you know what? I need to back up. These are not. I'm not saying these are the percentages. You know, on average, new contracts, depending on industry, maybe 4 to 6%. Renewals are 2 to 3%. These are. I'm not saying you have to do 5%. You have to do 3%. You, based on your own, expenses and your fully burdened rate, you have to pick what your percentages are. But I'm showing you there's different possibilities. But at the end of the day, do you really care how much you spent on a single employee if your profits increased by $500,000? And the answer should be no. Okay? That sales rep doesn't, in this example, the sales rep doesn't have any equity in the company, right? They have no daily control. You can fire them whenever you want. But in the next 12 months, that individual is going to give the company $500,000 in profit. Okay? So you ask yourself, all right, Josh, you said the 5 and 3%, but is 3% really plenty of commission? Is that enough? So let's look at 10 contracts. Okay? Let's say you have a sales rep that wins you 10, and it's $24 million. Your profit, 15%, 3.6, right? And if you go commission at 3%, that's $720,000 you're paying. Well, with the base salary, almost $800,000. I know some of you are laughing. I know it. I can hear you laughing through your computer. There is no way I'm paying somebody $800,000. Look, folks, you get a star superstar, and you make it absolutely crystal clear you're willing to pay them this kind of money. You're still making in profit almost $3 million. Now, that was 3%. Jump it up to 5%. And now your sales rep is making $1.2, almost $1.3 million. And you're losing about $500,000. Okay? Is 3% enough? Well, yeah, it is. But it's going to come down to negotiating, right? You should start, obviously, at, hey, we're going to do commissions at, 3%. They may come at 5. You meet in the middle at 4, right? On average sales reps, you probably have never negotiated with them. You've just said, hey, here's the deal. I'm going to pay you $65,000. You're going to receive, this in commission, and that's it. Well, if I were interviewing with you, oh no, I'll be negotiating my rates because I want to make crazy money. But if I make crazy money, you make crazy money. Okay? So again, I'm pushing my foot on the floor here. 90% are average. Okay? They might make quota. They will not exceed quota. Okay? And your company, they might increase revenue. But if you go with a star or a superstar, you may pay $1 million to make $2 million. Okay? If it bothers you, then build a smaller plan. But you need to assume there's multi-six figure here. So some of you are thinking, well, we're not very flat. We actually have a sales manager, a vice president of sales, government sales, commercial sales, whatever. And he's in charge of 4 sales reps. Although a sales rep could be making more money than the VP. Yeah. And so what you can do is you can take that 5% and give 1% to your VP. Okay. It's still not going to get your VP, making as much as a superstar sales rep, but it's an incentive. It's an incentive for the VP to absolutely ensure they're properly managing their team. That's a great tool. Okay? Now, if that vice president is complaining about, well, I want to make as much as them. They shouldn't be making as much, as I make. Well, then you tell your VP, well, then you need to go sell. You need to go out in the market and you need to go close your own contracts. Okay? It's one or the other. Now, imagine you have 2 business developers, right? Each hits their sales quota. Each makes total compensation of $250,000 a year. But your company makes $1 million profit. Some companies go, that's crazy. Nobody's worth that kind of money. And you would be absolutely wrong. So let's bring this full circle. Commission flow, 3-year contract. $3 million, okay, for this contract. It's a $3 million, 3-year contract. You got 15% margin. Okay, first you identify your percentages. Your base year, we're going to say 5%. The option years that are on a base contract are the residuals, okay? So for the option year, that should say option year 1, by the way, but it's year 2. So for year 2, it's 1.5%. Year 3, it's 0.5%. Renewal, base is 2%. Option years 2 and 3, 0. On the new contract, your revenue is $1 million a year, right? Your margin's 15%. Commission, that base year is $50,000, and that's what you should be paying your sales rep, which means you're going to have a profit of $100,000. For option year, the first option year, it drops to 1.5%. Instead of getting $50,000, they get $15,000. Why? Because you don't want them focused. You want them to be incentivized to win another contract, a newer contract. Okay? And in that situation, in that second year, your company profit jumps $35,000. And that's the way it should be. And in the third year, the commission drops to $5,000, 0.5%. And your profit as a company is almost 150, right? It's 145. But then your contract is expiring and you have to recompete it. And your sales rep is really important to helping ensure you win it again. So they jump back to 2%. That's the renewal. See, notice, base is new, option years under that new contract, residual. The renewal base, that's your renewal contract, and then you go back to residuals again, right? So to absolutely ensure that you maintain the $3 million contract, pay 2% to your sales rep. Okay. And that does mean that your profit is going to drop by $15,000 between years, 3 and 4, right? But then in your option years on the renewal contract, there are 0 commissions, and you maximize the remainder years of that contract at $150,000. And so if you look at your total commissions in the new contract, it's $70,000. And the total profits to the company are $380,000. The renewal contract, you're still paying commissions that first year, and it's $20,000. And the total profits jump for the company to $430,000. If you can understand, and what I've just brought everything together, if you can understand how important this is, you are going to be able to hire a superstar. Top sales people don't want to make quota. They want to exceed it, okay? One of the most valuable tools is to use escalators. So assuming you've got 15% margins, right? You can see here, these are the numbers from the last slide: 5% new business, 0.5% to 1.5% for your annual residuals, 2% for your renewal. If their quota is $1 million, any contract they win between $1 million and $1.5 million, tell them you'll give them 6%. Anything from 1.5 to 2 million, 7%. And then any contracts between 2 million and up, 8%. Let me tell you something. As a superstar, I look at this and I say, oh my gosh. So not only I may not just be making this measly 5% on new business. Hey, all I have to do is all I have to do is close these 3 contracts worth this amount, and that last contract, I'll get it 8%. Folks, this is how you hire top business developers. So make sure you have escalators in your commission compensation plan strategy. When do you pay commissions? Well, there's 2 factors. Right? Do you have current cash flow, and how much are you making per contract? But the reality is you're going to pay based on gross receipts. Don't do it monthly. Okay. That's just way too much work on your side. Do it quarterly. You pay every 3 months and you roll all that up. In other words, you don't have to borrow money, or you don't have to dip into reserves or figure out where the cash is coming from. Commissions only are paid after the client pays. And again, it saves time because you're only doing it 4 times a year. Now, this is a very common question. You fire your business developer 2 weeks after the contract's awarded. Okay? You are obligated to pay 100% of the commission. Okay, and if you have something in your employment agreement that says, well, you only get it based on the gross receipts, or you only get paid up to 90 days worth after you're fired, as a superstar, you can kiss me goodbye. Okay, this only applies to the base year, right? So it's not any of the residual years, renewal year, base year only. If I win you a $10 million contract, I want my money for helping you win it. Okay. Now, again, it's also paid on gross receipts, which means you'll be paying me over 12 months, right? So you don't have to pay the, 50,000, whatever it is, right, as soon as you fire me. No, it's going to be paid on when the government pays you. The exception to this is if the contract's canceled, and this should be in the agreement, if the contract's canceled, then commissions are canceled that point forward. Okay. What if the business developer tenders a resignation? Well, if it's during the base year, again, they get 100% of the commission. That's how you get stars and superstars. Okay? Any other year, the residuals, the renewal year plus the residuals, whatever, you got 90 days, right? If you resign in any year other than the base year of a contract, whatever gross receipts come in during that 90-day period, that quarter, that's what you're going to get paid. And after that, you're gone. There's no more money. So what did we learn today? Well, we number one, you got to run a lean company in order to afford top professionals, because you got to have this flexibility. If you are not lean, if you can't figure out how to get your margins higher, you've got bigger problems than trying to figure out how to get a strong salesperson. You need to remove the mental barriers about how much you pay sales folks, right? And you can be a one-person company. You could be a three-person, $1.2 million small business. You can still afford the type of salespeople I'm telling you here that you can hire. So anybody can afford a superstar. You need to set realistic expectations with yourself, the 3-6-12 model. Interview, make sure you're focused on walking opportunities through the pipeline. Use escalators in your plan. And commissions. You pay quarterly on gross receipts. Now, before we move to Q&A, if you need help putting this together, within the operations module, there is 2 documents, building comp and commission plans and hiring business developers with recommendations for interviewing, etc. And also in there's a list of what are in terms of job requirements, when you do a job board, etc. What are the requirements that you need to put for that sales rep? There's examples. Okay. So on that note, if you need help with this, just upgrade to advisor. We've had quite a few companies upgrade to advisor, and then some of them downgrade back to corporate level. But if you need help with this, hey, a month of advisor is worth every penny of it. So just give us a shout and we can do an upgrade. On that note, I am 5 minutes over, and I apologize for that. I'm 5 minutes over the hour. But let me go ahead and open it up for Q&A.